Welcome back to Plug and Play EV. I'm Steve, and in this one we'll be looking at the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Update for October 2024. Lots of activity since our last update, partially because of my busy travels during the summer and trying to get those videos out, but we'll look at what's happened in the meantime and what we can expect from the final quarter in NEVI actions. So when we left you, I had a couple more activations in Rhode Island, some interesting states starting to get into play, but also a lot of question marks over the states that had not solicited for RFPs or put awards for NEVI stations out there just yet. So we started to get a lot of clarification for that over the summer, with states like Washington, Oregon clarifying their positions, California adding some context, and a lot of these states, with a couple of exceptions like my own state of Massachusetts, really seeming to be close to the announcing of awards or definitely deep into their solicitations, start to become awards and partners who they're going to go forward with to make these plans happen on the ground. So it's really quicker now to list the states that are taking the back of the pack. Some of them we know, the Floridas and Wyomings, who have been known laggards and actual critics of the process. Others who have just really maybe lacked resources or just remained silent in general due to lack of familiarity with the whole process and waited for other states around them to go. So what I've actually done in this is start to put each part of the process into a score, because we do actually have states like Vermont and New York, which on the map are very far ahead because they have active stations open, but in some cases are actually a little bit behind in terms of things like the solicitation process. Vermont, for example, has not announced any awards, so there's some states that could score on having opened a station or having been fully built out, as Rhode Island has done because it's a smaller state, but where they are maybe behind on other sections. So put 10 distinct stages that I'll go through a little bit and put those together for a score overall out of 10 on how states are progressing with the NEVI map. So two of the notable names that we had as question marks on previous updates, Washington and Oregon, Pacific Northwest, big area for EV adoption, those have clarified their positions now. So Oregon has actually made some awards and we've got locations on the map for that part of the Pacific Northwest. And up in Washington, we've got the RFP in process and expecting awards by spring next year. Now, on the plus side, we know what they're doing now, have more of a clarification on what their timelines will look like. On the downside, that does mean that if awards are getting made next year into 2025, spring, maybe moving into summer if they're late, then that starts to put another year, 18 months onto the construction process. So you're talking into 2026 now for those states that are big EV adopters, but maybe behind on this NEVI process to really get steel in the ground and start having construction. Less concerning if you know what's coming, and also there is the possibility, not knowing the awards yet for some of them, that we can get these players like your Pilot Flying J's, like your Teslas, who have been there, done the awards and got some sites open already in other states that were quicker with their awards. So that is potentially something that will fast track some of those, and maybe those timelines for construction can move up. If it's more like a Loves who's just getting into the game, or your Travel Centers of America, maybe they have a plan to fast track these in 2025, but you would err on the side of thinking those will be more like 2026, possibly even the middle to end of that year. So that does feel like a long way away, but with other states progressing and a lot of awards out there on the map waiting to be broken ground, that still gives us some plenty to play with in terms of construction and making progress on the NEVI installations. So my thinking here with the scoring system was to kind of give you an overall flavor of progress and to counter in some of those other factors that were coming into play that maybe weren't reflected by my previous updates. So again, Vermont being a good example of a state that has activated a station, found one that it can update and make into a NEVI compliant location, but not actually having got that far with its awards or multiple solicitations. So the relatively simple scoring system I'm using is 10 stages and a point for each. That may change as we go on, as more become more important than others. But basically we're starting with having filed the NEVI plan, which everyone qualifies for because they had to do that in order to get any of the funds allocated. So you'll get at least 1 point for that. public consultations, which were a piece of the early NEVI planning, and your first solicitation, which is the RFP process that we've focused on a lot in previous updates, multiple solicitations, which is going to your next round of awards. So you've maybe got like Ohio, you've gone through a second round of solicitation and they've even made some awards. If you're in the multiple solicitation round, you're obviously having made awards and gone on to the next phase, so that's an extra point. Awards announced, obviously a big one, wanting to know where these locations are, or at the very least who the vendors are, who will be working on them in the corridors that you've highlighted. Sites in progress, that's in quotation marks because sites underway, sites under construction can mean very different things to different departments of transportation. But if we've got an indication from the state or from PlugShare that a site is under construction or underway in some sense, then we've put that as a point in their favor. Sites open is pretty easy. We know most of the time when they're energized because they're having these ribbon cuttings. So at least having one site open will get you a point there. Multiple sites open is obviously a benefit as well, shows you're getting a little bit further ahead. And then finally we have the fully built out phase. That's when all of your alternative fuel corridor miles have been covered, which is a station every 50 miles or less, and you've covered what is a very variable rate of AFC corridor miles. You can see that with Rhode Island, very small state, having already activated that and having achieved fully built out status. But again, knowing that Rhode Island only has 44 miles of alternative fuel corridor to fill, you can see how that was pretty easy with just the two locations that it activated. On the low end of that, you have Washington, D.C. with 27 miles, which is pretty easy to fill, of course. And on the high end, you have California with 7,675 alternative fuel corridor miles. So there's some variations to that, and we'll look at the nuances. But for now, just know that those are the points, and we'll look at the scores that different states have racked up here in October 2024. Business end of activity, we have 20 stations now that have been energized across 9 different states. Again, don't need to do those states, we'll just look at the maps and you can see for yourselves where your state has been. So here's the map of states that have already energized and those that have a site, NEVI site, under construction or in progress. And again, in some of these areas like your Texas, Ohio, Pennsylvania, a lot of these are starting to get multiple sites come into the construction phase. So you've got Loves going to work in the likes of Kentucky and Pennsylvania with its program, some of which are NEVI funded. Then you have a lot more EVgo pilot Flying J locations coming on in Ohio. You start to have Texas, which is heavily based on Tesla awards, but also some others that could be there. Utah is going to work with hopefully some locations coming soon. So we can see a bunch of different players starting to make moves, and this is before the leading vendor, Francis Energy, has really started to get cranking. So they have a couple of sites in Ohio, in Cridersville and Byersville, and some new sites ready to come online, but basically still limited to Ohio, but they are the leader in terms of awards. And once Francis Energy really does start to get cranking those sites out, that's where we can see, alongside Tesla, and hopefully starting to see some Loves action with a lot of different players there starting to contribute to the NEVI map and progressing states that are already in play and new states like Texas. So one final note just on the so many states now having plans out there. If you want to look at your individual state to see where they were as we start to move beyond the laggards and that kind of thing, and just knowing the ones that are leaving it behind, they do all have NEVI plans. So we can see those on a yearly basis. They were just supposed to be updated in August, September. So you can, I'll leave the link down below for driveelectric.gov and the NEVI progress page, which you can use to zero in on any particular state. It'll tell you how many AFC miles they have to fill, how much funding they're getting year by year over the 5 financial years, and then you can drill down if you're really interested into their latest plan. So that's your NEVI progress update for October 2024. Hoping to get these back in the bag every month here so that we can keep a steady track on the numbers and get a regular format for this now that a lot of the states have at least put out their solicitations, and very soon a vast majority will have announced awards. Are you happy with how your state is progressing, and what's in the pipeline, or have they just disappointed you and you can't see any real lights to getting stations in the ground? And as always, thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next update. Cheers.